Only a few years ago, India was hailed as the world's fastest growing economy. It even overtook China in gross domestic product or GDP several years in a row, posting an average growth of over 7% annually. For a moment, India's rise as a new economic powerhouse seemed unstoppable. The country was also on track to become the world's third largest economy. But of late, the red-hot economy appears to be losing steam. Growth last year plunged to 4.2%, the slowest in over a decade. And now COVID-19 has brought the already struggling economy to a screeching halt, throwing millions out of work and causing a humanitarian disaster of unimaginable proportions.
I think the government may not have seen the magnitude of the crisis that unfolded after the first lockdown.
This is a challenge for the economy. Yes, it's a challenge for growth. Yes, it's a challenge for overall health of the people, health of the country as a whole.
Will India survive the impacts of the coronavirus onslaught? Can it hope to get its health sector and the economy back on track? Or is it likely to get much worse before it gets better? May 23rd, 2019, the day when India celebrated Narendra Damodar Das Modi's triumphant return to power following an emphatic and historic victory in the Indian general elections. For the first time in nearly 50 years, Modi led his party, the ruling BJP, to win majorities in the parliament in back-to-back elections. But instead of resting on his laurels, Modi hit the ground running during his second term in office. His government quickly pushed through landmark legislation, abrogating the special status for the state of Jammu and Kashmir under Article 370 of the Constitution.
It was in the BJP's manifesto, and we believe in implementing our promises to the people.
Not shying away from problematic issues, Modi also pushed through the controversial Citizenship Amendment Act, or CAA, in Parliament. The bill gives citizenship to illegal immigrants belonging to religious minorities in neighboring countries, but not the Muslims. The controversial act led to communal riots in which scores of people were killed. But the government remained unfazed.
The principle that persecuted minorities are to be given priority in shelter, in asylum, is a well-accepted concept, and this has been done by other countries.
But the Modi government's bravado and seemingly unstoppable march came to a grinding halt in January this year when the COVID-19 pandemic struck. Within weeks, the infection numbers soared, and the government announced a sudden nationwide lockdown, throwing the economy off the track. Millions of workers lost their jobs. Unable to pay for their basic needs, they started walking hundreds of kilometers back to their villages. Trains, planes, public buses, and taxis had all vanished from some of the world's most congested cities. Factories across most states were also ordered to cease operations in a bid to stem the spread of the virus. But critics believe the nationwide lockdown was implemented abruptly and wasn't thought through, completely disrupting life in the populous nation.
We were, as a country, rather late in waking up to the crisis of COVID. I think our wake-up call should have come in December, January. Though my party, the Congress party, and our leader Rahul Gandhi did try and forewarn the government to sort of give a timely response to this crisis of COVID. But unfortunately, the government had its own priorities then. It was busy in Mr. Trump's visit, for example. It was busy in domestic politics. They could have woken up in time. And when they did wake up, they came up with a very unplanned strategy. The reason for that is not known to us, best known to the government. But the impact of that unplanned strategy is felt now in the society, in the economy, in the crisis itself, the COVID situation itself. So yes, a lot could have been done better.
It's absolutely false. This is sadly the case with many critics in India who make blatant false allegations without any regard to the facts. Please keep in mind that the Prime Minister has been openly having consultations with chief ministers of all states. This is not a secret thing. It's being done on video conference, and this was done before the lockdown was imposed. The lockdown was imposed by taking feedback from the state administrations, many of which are not run by our party. They're run by opposition parties. It's very easy to look back in hindsight and say that should have been different, this should have been different. But at that time, given the expert analysis, given what other countries were doing or trying to do, this was the best option feasible, and it has yielded results.
The jury is still out on whether the lockdown yielded results. But the fact remains the lockdown pushed an already slowing economy into the disaster zone. Millions of workers in small and medium industries suddenly found their meager earnings disappearing and were unable to make ends meet. The federal and state governments were caught unawares as millions started walking back to their village homes.
We had seen cases that people are walking down more than 1,000 kilometers across the roadside with their family. We had seen that horrible, terrified picture. People are walking, more than 200 people got killed because of road accidents. More than 30 people had died because the one-day train journey took 4 days to complete, and there is no food to eat, there is no water to drink, and government is sitting silent.
50-year-old Devendra Kumar is one among millions who found themselves without a job one evening in late March. Kumar, who hails from a village in the state of Uttar Pradesh, has struggled all his life to go through school and college. But all that he had achieved came to naught following the shutdown. His employer in the leather goods factory where he worked simply told him to pack his bags and leave.
आप घर पर जब जरूरत पड़ेगी तो आपको बुलाएंगे, नहीं जरूरत रहेगी तो नहीं बुलाएंगे.
They didn't call. Kumar waited, hoping against hope, but the phone never rang. Being the sole breadwinner of a large family that includes his wife, 3 children, brothers and in-laws, Kumar spends his days staring blankly into the future. That's when he and his family members decided to pack their belongings and began their long and treacherous journey back to their village on foot.
पता लगने पर पता चला कि शनिवार को ही प्रधानमंत्री जी ने देश में लॉकडाउन घोषित कर दिया और 22 तारीख को जनता कर्फ्यू उन्होंने क्लियर कर दिया. लेकिन कंपनी ने 21 तारीख को ही कंपनी बंद करके कहा कि आप लोग जिसको जहां जाना है आप अपने घर जा सकते हैं. जैसे भी आप घर जा सकते हैं जाइए. जबकि बस और गाड़ियां, टैक्सी, टेम्पू सब लोग सभी चीज़ें ये सब 21 तारीख को ही बंद हो चुके थे. हम लोग तुरंत अपने घर पहुंचे जैसे तैसे करके. हम लोग तुरंत हम लोगों ने जैसा भी सामान ले सकते थे कुछ भी, और हम लोग सब लोग वहाँ से उठे, बच्चों को लिया, फैमिली को लिया, अपना जो कपड़े ले सकते थे वो सब, जो भी दवाई गोली था.
During his journey back to his village, he could see the pain and suffering of these workers and their family members. Many of them collapsed and died because of hunger and exhaustion. Others were killed in road accidents.
और डेली सुन रहे हैं लोग मर भी रहे हैं. लाखों लोगों का पलायन चल रहा है दिल्ली से उसी दिन से. रास्ते में लोग परेशानी करके जैसे तैसे हज़ारों किलोमीटर, कोई 1500 किलोमीटर जा रहा है. किसी की कोई सुनने वाला नहीं. प्रशासन कोई हेल्प कर नहीं रहा. सुनने में आ रहा है कि प्रशासन सहायता भी दे रहा है, लेकिन हमारे पास तक तो आज तक कोई सहायता पहुंची है नहीं.
When they announced the lockdown, if a week before that they had arranged for transportation for the people who wanted to go back, obviously when there is a crisis, when there is a pandemic, people want to be with their own families. It's basic human nature. So all this, a sensitive government would have foreseen and would have arranged for transportation. If you want to go back to your villages, okay, we give you a window of 4 days or 5 days or 6 days, go back. We'll arrange buses, trains, whatever. That crisis could have been avoided. It was a humongous crisis. I mean, every second hour you would hear stories of people either dying of starvation or dying, some accidents, some people slept on the track and a cargo train killed them, a lot of accidents. All this could have been avoided. So, apart from losing jobs, losing lives, living in an atmosphere of uncertainty, so it is I would say a state-sponsored crisis. Pandemic, of course, was natural, but the way we dealt with the pandemic led to a state-sponsored crisis.
I don't know. As I said, it was a moral sort of trade-off at that time, and a lot of countries were doing it, and a lot of infections were beginning to come into India, and social distancing was thought to be the way that we would address it. So it was, I think, a difficult decision, a hard decision. In hindsight, one could say that it was imposed hurriedly, but at that time it was, I think, a moral trade-off, whether you save lives or whether you save livelihoods. And I think the government took a decision in its wisdom to try and save as many lives as possible. But given the structure of the Indian economy, given the huge number of people who depend on earnings by the day, literally, they earn during the day and are able to, provide for themselves during the day. At night, they can put food on the table. Given that that is the structure of the Indian economy, losing, means of livelihood impacted that part of the segment a great deal.
Kumar was fortunate that he could survive the long and arduous journey back to his village in the searing summer heat. Unfortunately, that wasn't the end of his problems. He's not sure how long he can survive without a job. He also doesn't even know where his next meal will come from.
ना बच्चों के खाने पीने का है, ना मेरे पास अभी तक कोई राशन कार्ड है, मेरे बच्चों के अभी तक कोई आधार कार्ड भी नहीं बने, बच्चों की पढ़ाई है वो सब छूटी हुई है, तो मैं तो हूँ परेशान इस समय और घर पे ही हूँ, ना ही कोई खबर लेने वाला है, ना ही कोई कुछ कहने वाला है। हर आदमी अपना आराम से बैठा है, जनता मरे, कोई महामारी से मरे, कैसे भी मरे, कोई भूखा मरे, किसी को इससे कोई मतलब नहीं है। और आज ये भी हालत है कि कंपनी खुल भी गई हैं तो जिनका हिसाब कर दिया उनको ले नहीं रहे हैं, 10, 15, 20, 25 आदमी जो भी उन्होंने रखे हैं उनसे काम चला रहे हैं।
The government, however, rejects the claim that these migrant workers were left to fend for themselves, arguing that the government has done all it could to help the vulnerable segments of the population under challenging circumstances.
From day one of the lockdown, huge amounts were transferred to make sure that the migrants were not in distress. So as I said, 22 million migrant workers got cash transfers in the first week of the lockdown. 80 million rural women got cash transfers in that first week, and 800 million people got food grains made available from the government-run public distribution system, whether they were entitled for it or not, because the Prime Minister was determined nobody would starve. So these measures were taken.
The reality is, the pandemic has put the government's finances under severe strain. The economy is shrinking rapidly. It's estimated that the economy will shrink by 14.2% in the June quarter and contract by at least 4% in 2020. But even a 4% contraction figure largely depends on the assumption that the virus will be brought under control very soon. The state governments are in a quandary as to how to deal with the crisis. As some states relax lockdowns, others are reimposing the measures. Still, the disease is showing no signs of relenting. India has recorded more than 1.7 million coronavirus infections so far, making it the world's third highest number of infections. 37,000 COVID patients have died.
It's a very unpredictable and very difficult situation. There are pockets in the country, large metropolitan cities, where situation is really grave, like Delhi, like Chennai, like Mumbai and Ahmedabad. There's the important points. And though some states things are gradually stabilizing, but Calcutta also is one of the other important hotspots. But in metropolitan cities, we see cases are increasing in a very rapid manner, and particularly since the last phase of the lockdown, and once the lockdown actually got over, things started deteriorating faster.
India is the only country when we have 500 cases, we entered lockdown, and we have more than 2 lakh cases, then we had opened the lockdown. What is the use of this? Can government give any argument or reason for that? So that had created a double impact: the impact on the pandemic and impact on the economy.
I don't agree with that criticism. We are 1.36 billion people. And if you look at the total number of people who got infected from coronavirus, out of that 80% people actually have got very mild exposure to coronavirus, which means they didn't even require to go to hospital. And at the same time, the spread is limited to 7 or 8, hot spots or cities and or the regions. But yes, for economy, it's a huge challenge. No, absolutely no doubt about it.
There's no doubt the pandemic has sent the Indian economy into a tailspin. Hospitals are flooded with COVID patients and businesses are shutting down. However, some businesses are trying to stay afloat in extremely trying conditions. Can India pull itself out of its severe predicament and recover from the coronavirus onslaught? The health crisis has hit all sections of society, both rich and the poor, workers and farmers alike. But the impact on the poor has been catastrophic. Thousands of factories have shut down, rendering millions unemployed overnight. Until today, Davendra Kumar remains clueless about what to do next. He has no more money left to feed his family or send his kids to school. He still hasn't found a new job, either in the city or back in his village.
घर पे कोई कमाने वाला और है नहीं, तो समझ में नहीं आया कि लॉकडाउन के बार बार लगने से हम क्या करें क्या ना करें। तो हम तो सोच सोच के भी परेशान हैं, और अब ये भी है कि घर पे कोई काम धंधा ऐसा है नहीं, क्या करें क्या ना करें, कुछ समझ में नहीं आ रहा।
Fortunately, the lockdown has now been partially lifted across the country. Factories and businesses have resumed their operations. But all businesses face an uphill battle to stay afloat in a post-COVID world. There's just not enough demand for their products. Many orders have been cancelled. The supply lines have also been severely disrupted. And they don't have enough workers since most have gone back to their villages. 35-year-old Abhinav Mahajan is a rising star in the small and medium industries segment in the country. The young managing director has taken his family-run solar panels business to new heights in recent years. The business has been growing at 30% to 40% every year, making a mark in the green technology space. Then, out of the blue, the lockdown struck in March, bringing all operations to a sudden halt.
We were forced to go completely locked down, totally unaware, totally unplanned, totally without any preparation. So Jan to March is the month of year closing. It's a quarter closing basically, last quarter. And lot of projects, most of the projects happen in Q4. And especially the March last few days, so many material was planned to reach our customers. The production was going in full swing. We were working 24/7. All of a sudden it was announced. Our raw material was on the way. Our material, final material was, we were getting it dispatched and it was on the roads. Our laborers who were working on the site, our laborers who were working inside the factory, all of a sudden we have to halt. So we were totally shocked and clueless.
Mahajan suffered major losses during the lockdown. It took him and his other directors some time to recover from the shock. They finally sat together to discuss a way out of the crisis. The road ahead post-lockdown, however, is unclear. But Mahajan considers himself fortunate since solar power is now considered a necessity in the country. Several solar projects are being implemented, especially in the agricultural sector.
And especially we had got some export orders in hand. That orders cannot be cancelled, but yes, the sentiments, the new orders, I would say, the new orders in pipeline, they will definitely get affected. When we opened the factory, we didn't have fortunately we had got the orders which were awarded to us before Corona times. Some of them got cancelled because our customers were not sure if they dispatch the material to the government body or private body, they will get the payment or not. Immediately after Corona, what has happened is our customers, we have got some payment confirmation, I would say commitment from them. That got certainly delayed, and we understand that also because their payments from their respective customers got delayed.
Like Mahajan, 37-year-old Nikhil Tukral is a new generation businessman who has overseen rapid growth in the family's business. Passing out of the country's premier National Institute of Fashion Technology, or NIFT, Tukral made a mark with his own brand of fashion garments, exporting to several European nations, the United States and Japan. His business was growing at 10% last year, but all that has now vanished.
With Corona, it's really shaken up the whole country, especially our industry, which I see a lot of my friends' factories, they are almost shut down. They're trying to survive or restart again, but it is very, very difficult. If somebody was working with 2,000 people and today they are working with 200 or 300 people, see the amount of jobs which were there and which are not there right now. So we were kind of getting prepared, but we thought it will only remain in one country or two countries, or maybe one or two customers will get affected, which will be maybe 10% of business might get affected. But it took no time and it was spreading in India. Till the time Prime Minister announced, we never thought it will just shut down in one go, because it was very difficult a time.
With relaxations in lockdown, Tukral's operations have resumed partially. At least it'll give him the opportunity to recoup his losses and keep the financial wheel turning yet again. But for it to recover fully and reach the pre-crisis levels will be very tough, especially under the present economic conditions.
Tell you the truth, we are still calculating the loss. Why? Because we are still hopeful. Some buyers are still planning to take some shipments. But yeah, I can tell you that I have already lost maybe 20% of my last year's turnover, which is a huge number for any business. Because work in progress and high time of the season, it's very, very difficult to now start again, especially at first thing we have had losses, we have had cancelled shipments. The second problem is, today, when we are starting again, we don't have a surety what is going to happen. The retailers are not in a position to give new orders. Winter season has already started. Sampling has not been done, obviously. And even they are in a shock. A lot of retailers are closing their businesses.
As Tukral resumed operations, shopping malls cautiously opened their gates as well. All possible precautions were taken in making the places safer. Nimesh Arora is the CEO of Select City Walk. He fully understands the difficulties faced by many retailers who have lost their business as a result of the lockdown. But he feels that the pain will only be temporary.
See, in the short term, definitely there is going to be pain, both in terms of jobs as well as businesses. There is going to, but on a long-term basis, if you look at it, and if anybody who's read the history of business, every 10 years there is one such event. Whether it was the 2008 global crisis, whether it is the COVID pandemic right now, or whether it was the Y2K crisis in early 2000 or the 90s. So every decade has seen some sort of a crisis that businesses have faced, and they have only found new ways to do business and come out stronger out of a crisis. Yes, it's the time to innovate, to find new ways of doing business. But if one focuses on the solutions and not the problems, I think you are sorted, you are okay.
Caught between a rock and a hard place, with soaring infection numbers and a shrinking economy, the Modi government has announced massive stimulus packages to pull the economy back from the brink. Free food grains are being supplied to millions of poor. Bank loan guarantees and waivers have been announced to boost growth in small and medium enterprises. But will these measures be enough? India, a nation under lockdown. It was once destined to become the world's third largest economy by 2025, but it's now staring at its worst recession since independence. The economy is projected to shrink by 14% in the June quarter and contract by at least 4% over the full year. After the lockdown was announced, the unemployment rate rose from 8% to 23% nationwide. What is clear is that the deepening COVID-19 crisis has derailed decades of the country's hard-won progress.
Growth forecasts for the economy are quite negative. They're in the negative territory. 3.2 is contingent on the number of assumptions that are made on the duration of the lockdown. If the lockdown continues even more, or if the unlockdown that we are seeing right now is calibrated to continue to remain, economic activity to remain at muted levels, then I think the growth forecast could be even more negative than has been forecast. The infections, as we know, are increasing in India now, but we are recognizing that there is a trade-off now. If we lock down too much and if this continues for too long a period, then the economy is going to be adversely impacted. And I think some amount of consideration of that trade-off has come into the decision that the government has taken to unlock the economy in a calibrated way.
In May this year, the government announced the long-awaited stimulus package equivalent to $265 billion or 10% of GDP to help rekindle growth and provide a social safety net for the vulnerable segments of the population. But critics feel that the stimulus package has fallen short of expectations. They believe it merely comes in the form of bank guarantees and waivers and does not go deep enough to address the huge devastation caused by the pandemic.
This is hardly a package. How does it help when you say, okay, you can go and get the loan, and I go to the bank and the bank doesn't give me loan? Obviously, there is a crisis of confidence in the economy. Nobody wants to take a risk. So, the easiest and the best, simplest solution in a country like India was direct cash transfer. That would have definitely, especially amongst the urban poor, because that's where your purchasing power kicks in, that's where the economy gets a boost because consumption gets a boost. as I said, I'm repeating because this is exactly how things should have been done.
It's been a sort of a credit and a liquidity support and a liquidity stimulus. The fiscal stimulus by itself has been about 1%, 1.5% of GDP, and a lot of that has gone to support the migrant labor. A lot of it has gone to support trying to create demand by putting money into the hands of people or trying to give them food grains for a period of time. So they've recognized the crisis and they've tried to address that crisis. But if you ask me, has it been enough? And I would say, given the magnitude of the crisis that has unfolded, it can never be enough. And I think one of the worries that the government has in front of it is, how will it pay for it? Will it have enough fiscal space to be able to pay for what it has promised?
They were doing supply side interventions by giving tax concessions to the corporates. But problem is that people are not spending. The consumption is at the lowest level of 12 years. And it is further coming down. People are not spending because there are no jobs. There is no job creation in the economy. So there is no job creation in the economy. Consumption is coming down. GDP at 11-year lowest. If you will see the purchasing managers index, that's also coming down for manufacturing and service industry. And government on the name of package is saying take bank loan. That's not package.
But the government disagrees. It feels that by simply throwing money to those who are desperate for cash will not help resolve the problems facing India today, especially the business sector.
If you look at the Prime Minister Garib Kalyan Yojana, money has been transferred into the account of the people. I mean, the government has spent more than 72,000 crore in that already. And more money is going to be invested. What is Manrega? The cash is going in the hands of the people. At the same time, when you're telling SMEs that you can go to a bank, borrow money without any collateral, and banks have been told to reach out and lend money to those people who need it so that they can restart their business, they can expand their business. That's basically given them the strength. So it depends. You see, that it depends on the mindset. This mindset, the Congress basically is suggesting that the only solution is that you put money in a big bag, charter a helicopter and start throwing money, and that will solve the problem.
Firstly, I don't know where this sense has developed that a package, has to only be the fiscal package. I was saying earlier as well, it's not just India. Every other country has used the portfolio of fiscal, monetary, and liquidity measures. Just, it's a temporary impact, and as long as firms are saved, the impact can actually be kept temporary, and that's why our set of measures have focused on ensuring credit to the firms, combined with reform measures which will enhance productivity in the economy and thereby enhance the capability of firms that are taking on credit now to be able to repay later. So we have focused on ensuring that the impact on the supply side is indeed temporary, and we've therefore combined credit and liquidity with productivity enhancing measures.
Notwithstanding the lively debate on the adequacy of the stimulus package, life for many small businessmen like Nikhil Tukral is still a hard grind uphill. They are not sure how the big numbers announced by the government would translate into money in businessmen's accounts.
It is a very, very big number. I don't know. It's a number which I don't understand. Where is it going? How is it going? Because to my business directly, I don't see any help coming. What I understand is MSMEs, it'll be easier for them to take loans. But today, if you go to bank, it is not about only me. If I see my friends going to the bank, we are not able to get our original limits also. So additional COVID limit which the government said, it is way beyond for a small company. Maybe for big companies it's a different story, but what I see as a MSME in our company, I don't see any benefit coming our way.
Target for the MSME credit is 3 lakh crores. So if you take about 50 weeks in a year, the run rate should be about 6,000 crores a week. That should be the amount of credit that should go in to meet the target of 3 lakh crores. In the first week, about 18,000 crores of credit was sanctioned, and close to 10,000 crores was disbursed. So the run rate is actually higher in some sense. Think about it as a 50 over match, where the first over actually the run rate has been greater than what is expected to achieve the target. That said, we will continue monitoring. I think it's important oftentimes to actually complement what one hears anecdotally with what you see in the aggregate data as well.
Despite the government's robust defense of its policies, unemployed worker Devendra Kumar is still groping in the dark. He can't make much sense of the government's packages as well, or how they will benefit people like him.
हाँ, लगता नहीं है कि हमें कोई फ़ायदा होगा उससे। मान लिया कि घोषणाएं हो रही हैं, ये भी माना कि सरकार सहायता भी दे रही है, लेकिन क्या वो सहायता फाइलों तक ही सीमित है? हमें नहीं लगता कि वो सहायता सारी फाइलों से बाहर आती है। हकीकत ये है कि ज़मीनी हाल ज़मीन पर तो कुछ भी नहीं नज़र आ रहा है ऐसा। ये सब चीज़ें सुनने में ही आ रही हैं, लेकिन ऑफिसों से या सरकार के मंत्रालयों से बाहर तक कुछ नहीं आया है अभी। हमें नहीं लगता कि वो उद्योगों को मिलेगी, मज़दूर वर्ग को मिलेगी। ना हमें नहीं लगा आज तक किसी मज़दूर को मिली हो, या किसी मझोले उद्योग को मिली हो, या लघु उद्योग को मिली हो। हमें तो आज तक कहीं सुनने में आया है नहीं।
The virus is causing massive disruptions across India. People are staying at home, avoiding travel, and shopping as little as possible, reducing demand for consumer goods and energy. Closed shops and idle factories have curtailed production. Still, the Indian government is hopeful that green shoots of recovery will emerge provided the pandemic is brought under control. If the virus continues to spread, however, the economic damage will be far more severe. Can Prime Minister Modi pull India's economy out of its slump? The pandemic situation in India is worsening day by day. The infection numbers have hit over 1.7 million, with 37,000 deaths. The country is now poised to overtake most nations in terms of infections. The only saving grace is that the fatality rate is progressively falling and is currently at 2.43%, which is one of the lowest in the world, according to the government. With a rising virus curve and negative growth numbers, there's a danger that the crisis will push the struggling economy over the cliff, especially in the near term.
The result of that is very much there in the sense that this quarter is very challenging, and my own analysis is that even the next quarter is going to be quite challenging, because the monsoon period will come. Monsoon is going to hit hard in terms of coronavirus spread in cities like Bombay, even Delhi and southern part of the country, the peninsular India, and that would have its adverse impact on the economy. So this current quarter is going to be bad, and the next quarter is also going to be very, very challenging. But I think come 1st of October and the quarter and the Puja time and Diwali time, I think this will start, cheering up. And by end of this year, the third quarter in our fiscal is going to post positive results, and will also basically lead to even a better quarter. The last quarter would be even better.
But the immediate outlook looks grim. Solar energy entrepreneur Abhinav Mahajan is feeling less hopeful about the immediate future of his company. He just doesn't believe his business can see any meaningful activity this year.
It will take a complete 2020 should be completely wiped out from the calendar now. 2020, nothing looks a lot of exciting, because even today, the situation is not clear whether we will continue working like this or we will be forced to go for another lockdown. So this year is totally gone. We have to see when the situation normalizes.
But it doesn't look like the crisis will end anytime soon. The economy is now at a standstill, while the number of infections continues to rise exponentially. Over 50,000 new cases were reported recently. The surge in infections has also put tremendous pressure on the country's fragile healthcare infrastructure. The United Nurses Association, based in New Delhi, has estimated that more than 1,000 nursing staff have been infected in the capital alone due to the substandard personal protective equipment, or PPE, or the lack of it. To make up for the shortfall, fashion garment exporter Nikhil Tukral is now switching to medical textiles just to stay afloat. It'll also help bolster the sources of such crucial supply for healthcare workers to fight the disease.
One thing I've started a month back is we've entered into medical textile, which is need of the hour, and as per our, we've started making the PPE coverall gowns in a very small way right now. We want to make sure what we are making is high quality and good for the doctors. So we are making coveralls and gowns which are reusable and of a very high quality. For this, we have imported some seam sealing machines, which are a big necessity for this medical textiles. We are working on that aspect. Secondly, we are trying to revive our business, which is been our business for a long time, and we've been doing a very specialized business. So we are talking to the buyers more aggressively now as the factories have started. We started doing new sampling, new ranges for the next seasons. So yeah, we're trying to survive on that.
Though businessmen are trying out different options, the same cannot be said about the poor and marginalized in a pandemic-devastated world. Unemployed worker Devendra Kumar simply has nothing to hope for.
तो इस 50 साल की नौकरी में काम करते करते हमें तो परिवार ही पालना मुश्किल हो गया। लॉकडाउन लग जाने पर तो हम तो और टूट गए बिल्कुल। हमें नहीं लगा कि ऐसा कभी होगा। कर रहे थे, चल रहा था, नहीं कर रहे हैं तो अब सब कुछ ख़त्म है। ना बच्चों का भविष्य है कोई, ना अपना कोई भविष्य है।
Still, in the midst of very trying circumstances, the government maintains it's in control of the situation and that the economy is on track. It says there are green shoots in the economy, with electricity and fuel consumption rising and retail financial transactions picking up. It's even talking of a rapid economic recovery once the pandemic cloud clears.
The V-shaped recovery will happen when the uncertainty about the pandemic is over. So it'll have to, till the uncertainty persists, not only in India, but the rest of the world as well, you know, the V-shaped recovery cannot begin till that uncertainty doesn't get over.
How far such optimism is justified is yet to be seen. But one thing is clear. Prime Minister Modi, who had a resounding election victory only a year ago, is facing his greatest crisis in his political career. Though his personal popularity is not dented yet, time is running out for Modi to turn things around.
Let me remind you that during this lockdown, during the pandemic, 93% of the people have said in various surveys that they are satisfied with the Prime Minister's leadership and handling this crisis.
According to the World Bank, India may see millions pushed into extreme poverty because of the pandemic. Can Modi pull India out of a deepening abyss? Can he put the economy back on track and save tens of millions from plunging into poverty again?
Seeing to this 20 lakh crore rupees package and the way bank loans are added, I had a doubt about government's understanding on the economic issues. I had my very sincere doubt that they understand economy, they understand how to come out of this crisis.
And it's a tragic situation. As long as there is a demand freeze, as long as there is a stagnation of incomes, I don't see them coming back above the poverty line. How do you ensure that demand gets defrozen? How do you ensure that the incomes don't stay stagnated?
I think the Prime Minister has done a remarkable job in first saving millions of lives. He took tough decisions. which some critics who only criticize have continued to criticize, but otherwise public health experts and world experts and other nations have all looked up to India as having done remarkably well.
Prime Minister Modi has proved his critics wrong several times in the past. But the challenges he faces now, in the post-COVID, post-lockdown India, are simply humongous, to say the least. It's believed the lowest point of the economy will come after the COVID curve has peaked. And it's not clear yet when that will happen and what shape the curve will take. As some states in India open up, others have reintroduced fresh containment measures amid soaring infection numbers. Against the backdrop of a shrinking global economy, can Prime Minister Modi overcome the twin crises and put India back on the growth path once again?
Indians can pull themselves out of this crisis, I am 100% sure. But without government intervention, without government policies, without government handholding, it will take time.
I don't foresee, any change in our growth rate projections. Should be back to high growth path. Once the uncertainty on the pandemic is over.
If you bring the consumption back on the track, yes, you can improve. Yes, we can undo the kind of damage that has been done.
I'm confident that the Prime Minister can lead India's economy back up to very high growth rates.
At the moment, it remains unclear if the government will be able to pull the country out of the deepening crisis. New infections are surging, while the economy is wilting. If anything, evidence seems to suggest that the crisis may get far worse before it gets better.